Well, I happened to look at the calendar today and I realized it's a brand new month. I'm not sure why it took me 7 days to realize it, but it is October, which can only mean one thing. Actually, it can mean a few things. Of course, it's Halloween or horror season. As you can probably tell, I'm thrilled by that. But it also means that it is time to update my Oscar predictions for next year's 2026 Academy Awards. I'm not sure which is scarier. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you, of course. Another round of Oscars power rankings or predictions. I went through these yesterday. I had a brainstorming session with some of my members. I've been reading, obviously, the feedback from various film festivals, which does include the secret screening of Marty Supreme that happened last night at NYFF, the New York Film Festival. So I did factor that into my predictions. I actually had to make some changes on the fly based on the reception of that film that I saw. On this video and all the previous rounds that I've been doing since May of this year, I'm insane. I'm only covering those prestigious top-of-the-line categories, which would consist of course, Best Picture, all 4 acting categories, the 2 supporting and the 2 lead, and Best Director. A lot of people have been inquiring about the below-the-line predictions that I will be doing. And in fact, I introduced them in a bit of a rollout fashion in the month of November. The first video I'll be doing in the first week of November is going to feature the screenplay categories, best casting, and the animated feature. Let's get into the October updates for the Oscars. So for these categories, if you've not seen one of these videos before, I basically do the 10 or the 5 if it's in regards to the other categories. And then I do a bench 5 or 10. So you'll see your best picture 10 if it were to happen right now. And then on the next slide, I have 10 movies that are in the mix that could any given moment pop in here to the main 10. They're my bench 10. And the same thing can be said when we get to the acting categories and director, except it'll be 5 and 5, 10 overall. In looking at best picture, I decided to move up Hamnet to number 1, which of course dropped down Sentimental Value, which was my number 1 last month. And then I've got One Battle After Another at number 2 from Warner Brothers. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, what's the mentality there? Because I know that's probably everybody's 1 and 2, but the order might be a little bit different. These are most likely to get nominated. This is not necessarily about wins right now. However, I do see Hamnet as being a bit stronger in terms of being the eventual winner based on the preferential ballot. That's just my opinion. But I do think that if Hamnet's getting 2, 3, or 4s out of 10 in a ranking system, it could end up being better than One Battle After Another that may be a bit more divisive in terms of where it's being ranked by the various Academy members, or even more so like international members, as this is a very American, almost Western, like crime drama type of film that I just suspect the international appeal will go a little bit further with a movie like Hamnet. I just think that when you say it's PTA's year, that could be something like director. That could be something like a combo between like director, screenplay, editing. Yeah, I mean, by the way, he's in the mix for all the various texts in his films, most of them. My kind of support behind Hamnet being the number 1 this month also kind of comes in play with some of the other categories, particularly like Jesse Buckley and Paul Mescal. If they end up winning in those categories, usually the acting, the stronger film, and I mean among the Academy, tends to help the acting nominees. Not always, but sometimes. So if you're in a Best Picture nominee, and that Best Picture nominee got more votes or ended up winning Best Picture, then your voting and your votes is probably increased because it kind of comes along with that. I mean, Mikey Madison and Honora is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Sentimental Value is still in my top 5. I did drop it down to 3. You know, this is a movie that I'm dying to see. I have not seen it. I've got it as one of 2 Neon Players. I've also got it as one of 2 international films in Best Picture. So it is strange to me that Neon has both of the international representations if this ends up coming to fruition this year. But it is possible because, you know, Neon has been on a tear when it comes to Oscar nominations, yes, but just putting out movies that are so well received and regarded on the awards circuit. Multiple years now, they have this string going. And you can look at awards like the Palm that it won at the Cannes Film Festival. That was for It Was Just an Accident, which I'm leaving in my 10. I actually put it in there right after it won the Palme d'Or. But Sentimental Value is a movie that I feel like it sounds very Oscar to me, and I've said that on previous videos. I just think it sounds like a contender, and it does have that international piece, which I think is going to be huge. I've got Sinners at 4 for Warner Brothers. It dropped down just one spot. Sinners and Wicked for Good, those are the two blockbusters. And then you look at a movie like Avatar: Fire and Ash, which I've got down at number 7. I'll talk about that here in a second. So that would be 3 essentially blockbuster films in the top 10, which does not always happen. In fact, there's usually just like one that's like, like a crazy amount of money that it made at the box office, sometimes 2, but rarely 3 or more. The thing with me, with the 3 that I have in here kind of doing that, is that Sinners is not, when you watch it or when you heard about it, you didn't think, at least initially, I don't remember thinking like, this is a summer blockbuster, or this is like, the next Jaws or E.T., or like, you just thought of it as like a genre film with vampires, with a really cool director in Ryan Coogler, who had done the Black Panther films and some other like socially important stuff. So it was going to be really well directed. Michael B. Jordan's well respected, great cast, Delroy Lindo, etc. But you just, at least I don't remember hearing that impression prior to its release, that Warner Brothers is putting this out to be like a $1 billion picture. Like, I just didn't think that's what this movie's aim was. Once it was super successful at the box office and otherwise, because it really ended up being the first major hit for movies in general in 2025. And once that happened, then you go, okay, it's a blockbuster second. So that's why I'm comfortable having all 3 of them in there. Now, if one of those blockbusters does get taken out, it's most likely going to be Avatar. Let me talk about Wicked for Good. If this movie, which is a part 2, not really even a sequel because it's like act 2 of the musical, but we'll say sequel just to make it easier. If this sequel is better than Wicked last year, part 1, and when I say better, I mean more well received. So if the Rotten Tomatoes score, if the box office dollars, if just the overall reception for the movie, like on the circuit prior to its general public release, because the fans are going to love it, If that stuff is better than the first one, it's getting nominated. I don't know why it wouldn't. Now, if it's worse, let's say it's like in the 70s on Rotten Tomatoes, and, Metacritic's in the 50s or 60s, and people are saying it's too long, and there's just a lot of mixed bag reviews, then it could be in trouble. But ironically, I would probably still have it in, unless it was like just trashed across the board. But if it was like mid or average, I would probably still have it in. It would just be around the 10 spot. But right now, I think it's a top 5, because based on the trailers and based on everything I know about the first film, which they were filmed roughly the same time with the same cast and director and everything, I think that if that movie got 10 nominations, and this is basically like a to be continued, and this is the second half of what's already been filmed, that, you know what I mean? Like, I know it's collectively like a Kill Bill situation, but at the same time, it's like almost like it's the same movie. So that could hurt it, because a lot of members might go, I just nominated this thing, I'm doing it again. But I think it is going to be different enough, because thematically, I've seen the musical, and that second act is completely different. It's a very different vibe, feeling, and it's also very different arcs for those main characters, particularly Elphaba and Glinda. Marty Supreme is a reactionary entry for me, and I'll explain. So if you watched my video last month, or any of the other ones starting in like July, I think, maybe August, I had it at number 11. For the last 2 or 3 rounds of this, it's been at my number 11. And the reason being is because I felt like it could be a major contender for Best Picture. But nothing was really telling me that it was concretely, aside from just my feeling on it. The single Safdie brother could or could not be a success. I mean, we know what happened when the Coen brothers split up. We saw, actually very recently with The Smashing Machine, what happened with Benny Safdie. I thought the movie was decent. I liked it, but it's definitely not a Best Picture player. And then, so I'm like, well, Marty Supreme could be the same thing. The main thing that Marty Supreme has going for, well, a couple things really, and that's the Timothée Chalamet starring role. The guy gets nominated for like commercials at this point. I mean, he's doing anything he does, he gets nominated for it, which he should. He's putting in great work. And then the Christmas Day release. The third thing that Marty Supreme kind of has going for it is that it's really the only thing that A24 with a straight face can push this season, at least for Best Picture. They might have other things in the mix from a tech standpoint or performances. We just mentioned The Smashing Machine. We'll get there in a second. But from a film, Best Picture, director, that kind of stuff, it's Marty Supreme, right? I mean, unless there's something that hasn't come out yet that's going to kind of blindside us, I just don't know what else A24 could really get behind. The feedback from NYFF was enough, and I used this analogy on my members only video, was enough to push Humpty Dumpty off the wall. Marty Supreme at number 11, there's a fence, right? On this side of the fence is the top 10. Back here is like 11 through 30 or whatever. And Marty Supreme has literally been sitting on that fence with his feet dangling, just waiting for somebody to, fuck up or fall asleep or whatever. And NYFF came along, secret screening, tons of reviews, all this stuff I just mentioned about A24, Timmy, blah, 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 and kicked it right off the fence. So it is now into my top 10. I moved it up number 6. I don't think it's a top 5 contender yet. And the reason being is because that would be reactionary. You have to take the festival screenings with a grain of salt. Every single person that was in that room last night is either a part of the production or A24, or they're a critic, a film fan, or they're a cinephile, or all of the above maybe. So that group was a very niche group that was dying to see this film and knows everything about cinema and award season and everything else. It wasn't a general audience, in other words. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. And Timmy's in the audience, Safdie's introducing it, A24's there throwing parties for people that went to see it. You just got to be careful, And then once the film comes out, if my cousin is saying it, plus I have everything from folks that were at NYFF, then you go, okay, my mom saw it and she fucking thought it was tremendous. She's a little bit older. She's maybe one of the Academy voters kind of demographic. Number 7's Avatar: Fire and Ash. Haven't moved it. Don't know what to do with it. I got to be honest with you. And I thought that, like I said before, if there's a blockbuster to get kind of the short end of the stick, it's probably Fire and Ash, because I do think Wicked for Good and Sinners are in. So I'm leaving it alone for this month also because of the James Cameron factor. And I've said that before. I just don't want to bet against him. I've done it in the past and he shows up, and I've even told myself and all my followers, it's not going to hit, it's not the first one, it's not the last one, it's just a sequel, Way of Water, but who gives a shit? It's the same thing, it looks the same, and he gets in, so I don't want to prematurely remove Mr. Cameron. I'm not going to do it. And I mentioned it was just an accident already. The combination of Neon Studios and the Palm winner, and I've mentioned this before too, that's not going anywhere for me until I'm all right, well, that's not going to happen. But the reviews have also been very, very positive on that as it's continued to roll out at various festivals, and various folks have seen it in Letterboxd and Rotten Tomatoes, etc. And not only that, it's a very important narrative, yes, in the film, but also for director Jafar Panahi, who I think is going to be in the director lineup. We also know France recently submitted it as their submission for international feature, so I think it's going to be in that category. So those crossovers make sense to me. And that combo I'm not going to go against, because I think it's 6 out of the last 7 years that stat has come true, where if you are a neon film that won the Palm, you go on to be nominated for Best Picture. But it's a pattern that is hard to look away from, so I'm not going to take it out until I have to. The last two are interesting in my top 10. Jay Kelly from Netflix, I left at number 9. I had dropped it down to 9 from 3 or 4 the month before last month, and I'm leaving it at 9. I had told myself a couple weeks ago that, which would have been after TIFF and Telluride, that I was probably going to take Jay Kelly out. I said, Netflix is it's crazy. The whole Netflix thing is crazy. I don't support the cinematic, which you definitely have to put in air quotes with Netflix, rollouts of these films. Some of them don't even come to my state, but they'll release them, at one movie house that they own in New York for a week, and it's eligible. I'm paraphrasing, but they hit the bare minimum in terms of making sure their films qualify for award season, and the Oscars in particular. So I don't like that, first of all. Second of all, they have so much this year, and you go, okay, well, most studios are going to get 2 movies in, if that, 1, maybe 2. Nobody's going to really get more than that. So why does Netflix have 6 players that are huge players, at least in the pre-season, if you will, for Best Picture? I don't know. I don't know why they kind of pushed all these out there as awards films, or how that kind of caught on. Some of them I do know, because you have Guillermo del Toro, for example. Obviously he's in the mix. And then the same thing can be said for Jay Kelly, because you have Noah Baumbach, who's no stranger. But you've got, George Clooney, who is essentially playing a version of himself in this movie. The reason I'm leaving it at 9 is because the reactions out of Venice, I think it was Venice initially, we're kind of I don't know. That might not be what we need. Okay, it's not the thing. And I'm oh shit, Jay Kelly might be dead. And then it went to, I guess, TIFF next maybe, or Telluride, or both. And it was kind of super positive. Everybody loved it. Rave reviews for Clooney, Sandler, blah, 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 blah. And then NYFF recently was just kind of it's okay. So it's kind of not good, great, it's okay. Really scattered reception for Jay Kelly. But it has balanced out a little bit to where I feel it's enough goodwill in the reviews of that film to keep it in the 10, if for no other reason because of the themes and the narrative in the movie. Hollywood, the industry, the Academy they absolutely love showering down praise on movies that deal with what they do in Hollywood, in the world of movie productions. And Jay Kelly is a movie about a dude who is aging out as a very famous actor. It'll probably be one of their favorite films, honestly, of the ones that are at least in the mix here, because it sounds like maybe the most Academy friendly, maybe Hamnet, but other than that, like, this feels like they're going to think the movie's about them. You know, they're going to feel something personal, like a personal attachment to it, to the material. But with House of Dynamite, you could have a similar situation, but what a House of Dynamite has going for it that made me put it in as the other Netflix play, which is why it's in here, I think Netflix is going to have 2 this year, is the Catherine Bigelow factor. And also I saw House of Dynamite. And I do think that along with One Battle After Another, those 2 films in particular will be very topical and timely with the Academy. And they love getting behind a PC message or a narrative that, you know, makes them feel like an ally for, you know, political stances or, you know, whatever the case may be, different movements. And in A House of Dynamite, Bigelow directs that like, let's do something, you know, like, holy shit, like this is hypothetical at this point, but it has a very, very real quality to it. It is just as frightening as it is entertaining because of that reason. And it's very timely. And I think that her name being the first female to win Best Director with them and being a similar type of world that she's in with the wartime or the political drama thrillers, I've got A House of Dynamite just squeaking in at the 10 to be Netflix's other player after having seen it. As we bring in the next slide here, I'll go through this one a little bit quicker and show you my near misses, my 11 through 20. Deliver Me From Nowhere dropped out of the 10. It was actually at number 10 last month, which initially it was at like 7 or 8, so it keeps kind of falling down the charts. I don't think it's going too far down though. It is the music biopic of the season. Song Sung Blue, which I'm going to mention here in a second, is another one that's kind of coming up in the ranks for me in my head when I start kind of thinking about it. But between those 2 films, those are the only real music biopic representations we have this year. I know that sounds silly, but the Oscars love nominating music biopics. So whenever there's one that's critically acclaimed or has an auteur director or anything like that, even a previous winner acting or whatever, you've got to stop and go, okay, well, is this a thing? Let's see it. Let's find out what's going on. And by the way, I'm not going to call it Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere. I still hate that title. It sounds like a documentary. Stop doing that. Why are they doing that? Fix that. Speaking of Netflix, we've got Frankenstein at 12. It did move up quite a few spots for me. A lot of really good feedback. I actually see this one next week. I've heard some mixed stuff about the length of the film, etc. But at the end of the day, the simplest thing I can tell you is it's not in my 10 yet, but it could very quickly go into my 10. Nightmare Alley got in for Del Toro. The Shape of Water won Best Picture, which is a movie for all intents and purposes about a woman having a romantic relationship with a fish. You know, I mean, I'm simplifying it, but that they love him. They absolutely love Guillermo del Toro, and so do I, frankly. You know, Pinocchio a couple years ago for animated. So he's always in the conversation. So if he nailed this classic Mary Shelley story, this cinematic, legendary creature / film kind of franchise, really, and he nails it with his like signature aesthetics, then it could be in there. That could be the House of Dynamite for this year, and it could be in the 10. No Other Choice from Neon is the Park Chan-wook film that I want to put in the 10 so badly, but if you remember, I already have 2 international films, and I actually did have No Other Choice in the 10 when I did like my mid-month kind of like updates after TIFF, and I was like getting in my head where I'm like, that's 3 international. Like, yeah, I can't do that. And then not only on that, but on top of that, it was 3 Neon. So I had 3 from an independent studio, which would be a precedent, and at least in the Best Picture 10. And I had 3 from international, like foreign language films in the 10, which would be a precedent. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, that could happen, and that could really fuck everybody's predictions up, because everybody's probably thinking like me, where it's like, well, that's never happened before, so why? But I do think that if there's a year that it could happen, it could very easily be this with a movie like No Other Choice, because Park Chan-wook has like been right there so many times, and he is owed a moment. I think his moment is coming. I really do. I know about the whole WGA thing, and I don't think that's gonna like bleed over into his potential with a movie like No Other Choice. So we'll have to see how it pans out. Now, No Other Choice could slip in for a movie like It Was Just an Accident, and then you still have 2 international and 2 Neon, and it's not a huge, you know, mind-blowing prediction. Testament of Ann Lee, I left alone at 14. And it's so funny because before I did this slide and I was kind of reordering stuff about a week or so ago, I was dropping it out of the 20. Testament of Van Lee because it didn't have a distributor. And we're getting late in the season in terms of like picking up a movie and campaigning it. So I said, well, all right, I mean, the reviews were kind of mixed on it. It's kind of like, it wasn't like The Brutalist where it was like largely positive. It was kind of like middle of the road, mostly positive or favorable, but a few people going like, what the hell was that? That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So it did have a mixed reaction, and it didn't have a distributor. It had that TBD next to it for several months. So I was like, it's gone, it's dead. And then literally like the next day or a couple days later, Searchlight picked it up. And Searchlight doesn't really have a lot in the mix. I actually dropped Rental Family out of my 20, which was on there last month. But I think that's out of play now, unless maybe there's a resurrection for Brendan Fraser in acting. But otherwise, I think it's dead. And so the only other thing they have is this thing on, which might not even be a thing. But Testament of Van Lee, when Searchlight got that, I was like, okay, whoa, hang on a second. I'm not dropping it. I believe it's staying put. And not only that, I think it really helped Amanda Seyfried. I mean, we'll get there in a second on the next category, but Searchlight picking that up was a big deal. I dropped Begonia down a couple spots. I just don't think this is a picture player. A lot of people do. I saw the new trailer yesterday. I watched that with some of my members. And I do think it's going to be technically great, and it's going to probably get a lot of shout outs in the tech categories. I could even see acting, even though I don't currently have either of those in my 5. I'm talking about Plemons and Stone. And I don't have Yorgos in director either, but I just see it as a tech player, a below-the-line player. It seems like it's going to be too weird, too out there to be palatable for the Academy, even though I do feel like it's going to be a really, really good movie. What a lot of people tend to forget because of the recent pattern with Yorgos films, the recent pattern, like in the last 5 years. But before that, he missed a lot, Now, his movies were great, but he missed with the Academy. Killing of a Sacred Deer, Dogtooth, The Lobster, Kinds of Kindness even more recently. But, he hit really well with The Favorite. He hit great with Poor Things. But it's a pattern that's like in the infancy stages of its development. So, again, you don't want to be too reactionary. It does have good reviews, which is great. It does have Focus, which is a good studio you want behind it. But, think of a movie like Nosferatu last year. It got a lot of tech nominations, but Focus couldn't get it over the hump for Best Picture or any like major acting categories. So that's where Begonia kind of falls for me right now. I left The Secret Agent from Neon at 16. I haven't moved that in actually a couple months. I do think acting and international is probably the best thing for Secret Agent this year, but it's another one, just like No Other Choice, that depending on how the international features shake out, it could end up in the 10. I mentioned Is This Thing On already from Searchlight. I think they're probably going to get behind Testament of Van Lee now. But, Is This Thing On? It has not come out yet. So we don't have a ton of feedback on that film. I just know that it's a Bradley Cooper directed film. And it sounds like it's going to be at least adjacent to the industry with the stand-up comedy. And I don't know if does TV stuff in there. I'm not sure. With Will Arnett. So we'll see. And then real quick before I talk about the 2 with the yellow there that are new entries into the 20, let me just talk about the Smashing Machine real quick because I did see that one. I left it in the 20, but I dropped it down just, I think, a spot to number 19. I think the best play for the Smashing Machine is performances. I think the movie has a bit of an indie auteur feel to it that I could see the Academy giving it some votes. But obviously with it being this low on the list and kind of dropping, I don't think it's going to happen. And then my 2 new entries on the board, they were always kind of outside on the master list. Die My Love, from movie and directed by Lynn Ramsey, who has had various, her films have had various things show up here and there at the Academy, but never like Best Picture, Best Director, that kind, top of the line major stuff. I obviously don't think it's like very likely to happen, as I've got it down here at number 18 currently. But after seeing the new trailer and then the teaser that came out initially, the feedback from Cannes, a lot of positive feedback on it, a lot of like, this is dark subject matter, but it's really, really good. And the performance of Jennifer Lawrence's career. The main thing about Picture is Mubi. They don't have anything this year. With Mubi, the pattern is just starting. Okay, and it's really with the substance. And last year, that was a very successful campaign for that film because, if you've been following this for a long time, you probably know that, but that is not an Academy film. Under no circumstance in this world would anybody that does this on a regular basis prior to like October-ish, maybe November of last year, thought that The Substance was going to get nominated at the Academy Awards. Maybe Demi Moore with a straight face you could have pushed, but nobody would have thought director, screenplay, picture. Nobody. Okay? Now, once it became obvious with precursors and other bodies and the Critics Awards and that kind of stuff, then yeah, people started going, oh, okay, well, hang on a second. Maybe this weird, sick body horror film can get in. And then, of course, we know what happened. It ended up happening and making history and being really the first like gross body horror film I can remember in an Academy lineup. It's usually like those like psychological thrillers if you're doing horror, you know, Get Out, Silence of the Lambs. In other words, you're like a magician to me that you were able to get The Substance nominated. So I'm going to give you some credibility and notoriety when it comes to your one, what would seemingly be a player this year in Die My Love. And not only the movie factor, but the fact that Jennifer Lawrence is giving the performance of her career, which, by the way, she's won Oscars and been nominated several times as well. So this is better than all of those. I think you have to pay attention to it. And then the other one that's sneaking right in here at number 20 for now is the other music biopic I already talked about called Song Sung Blue from Focus. Now, of course, they have Hamnet and Begonia. So this would be a crowded situation for them too in terms of campaigning on the circuit. But it is a music biopic. And if Deliver Me From Nowhere ends up going nowhere, with the exception of maybe Jeremy Allen White, which is a possibility, then Song Sung Blue could kind of creep up. You got Kate Hudson, who, you know, they're probably dying to give her a nomination. Hugh Jackman's in the mix. We'll see. But music biopics always give me pause when I'm doing predictions. I'm always like, which ones do we have coming? And the only one I really knew before about a month or so ago was Deliver Me From Nowhere, Springsteen. But Song Sung Blue kind of shot into my radar, and I'll talk about another part of that movie here in a second. So these next slides usually go a lot quicker because I've already talked about the movies, and I'll just kind of go through the picks and where I have them currently in the power rankings. Lead actress will be up next. I don't think anybody in the world that does this, at least, is not going to have Jessie Buckley at number 1, maybe 2, but definitely in that top 2. I've got her at number 1. She was my 2 last month. I basically switched her with Renate Ransva for sentimental value. I've heard that Jessie Buckley just gives basically what is being called the performance of the year. And I already showed you earlier that because of that, I'm kind of coupling it in my prediction with Best Picture, which is why I have Hamnet at number 1. You know, if Jessie Buckley impresses that much and makes that much of an impression on the Academy when they view the film, that could cross over to their picture ballot as well. So I think the strength of Buckley's performance, and probably Paul Mescal too, we'll get there in a few minutes, are going to really help Hamnet overall, even with things like Chloe Zhao and Below the Line when you're looking at it's a Shakespearean era period piece. Are you kidding me? Production design, costumes, maybe hair and makeup. Renate, you know, I love her. She got snubbed for the worst person in the world, and that should not have happened. She's going to get nominated. Is she 2? I don't know. Maybe not. It might fluctuate. But I really hope she gets a nomination, because if not, we got 2 years for her where it's like, what? I'm sorry, why did we do that? So the only thing that kind of worries me a bit as I go forward is I heard that she kind of disappears for portions of the film, which I didn't know that prior to like a week ago. So hearing that, I think she's probably still going to be impressionable enough to do something, when it comes to the Academy remembering who to nominate. Cynthia Erivo, I moved up just a spot, I think. I've already kind of talked about Wicked for Good, but she comes along with that. If the movie is better than the first one, like I said, better well received, then she's in. Elphaba, and really Galinda too, even more so, we'll talk about in a minute, has a arc that's impressive because it's almost like a different performance from the first act of the film. More so Galinda, but Elphaba too. I mean, they're still together as this like pairing, but their arc takes them to different places where they're separate for a lot of it as well. And it's darker thematically, a lot more dramatic, less fun, I've said before in the past, than part 1 was. She's on the cusp of that EGOT too, don't forget, which a lot of people, if they're into it big time at the Academy, they know that. They know she needs that O in EGOT. And then I already mentioned Amanda Seyfried, and I moved her up into the 5 almost like this when I heard Searchlight picked it up. Because I got to imagine, based on all the feedback she had been getting before it had a distributor, it's the same thing, but now they have a distributor. And it's also a Searchlight, which is really good, like I said, about getting lead acting performers nominated. And then Jennifer Lawrence, I think I said this to my members yesterday, I see it. I just see it. Now, you'll see when we get to the next slide in the near misses, there's just nobody that's like glaringly obvious to be in that 5th spot. If there was somebody that was like, they're definitely getting into the 5, then she wouldn't be on here. But with J-Law being as well revered and regarded as she is in Hollywood and in the Academy specifically, in the awards circuit bodies, if this is the best performance that she's ever given, which I've heard it is, not only that, it's a meta performance where it's like life imitating art, imitating life, and she's, this postpartum and depression and anxiety over new motherhood and marital issues, and like, that's a personal, intimate story to her, a personal character that she's able to connect to. That's a lot. We were talking about Jay Kelly earlier. I know that's much more from like a lighthearted comedic standpoint. But those type of performances go a long way with the Academy because they mean something to the actor that's portraying it, where it's almost like they're trying to reenact something that they felt or they've gone through themselves. So I am a believer in Jennifer Lawrence. Now, that's with sight unseen. I haven't seen the movie. I know a lot of you have, but sight unseen, I'm a believer in her based on her legacy. And I think that she's in the 5 until one of these others make me go, okay, well, I guess J-Law is going to get the short end of the stick here. Let's look at them. So the near misses right now for me at number 6 is Emma Stone. Emma Stone would be that swap out for J-Law if it were to happen right this second. I'm not doing it yet, though, which is kind of what I was talking about when I talked about Begonia as a picture, just because I don't know about the reception aside from the tech categories from the Academy. I will say that Emma Stone obviously is one of the best alive, and she gets nominated a lot, okay? And she's a winner, previous winner twice. She's phenomenal. And I'm sure she's going to be fucking phenomenal in this. I mean, I've seen the trailer and she's already blowing me away. So I don't doubt it in any way whatsoever. Same thing with Jesse Plemons, although his obvious success in the past is not as great as hers, but still, I mean, I'm sure it's a great performance. Will that hurt her though? In other words, is this like a Meryl Streep situation where it's like they just nominate her because she's Emma Stone? Or is this like the performance is like, holy shit, can you believe what she did in this movie? How transformative it was. What she put her body through, like all this kind of stuff that you hear about these actors that really go to great lengths for roles. I don't know. I don't know. I think it could hurt her if the Academy goes, well, she just won an Oscar. Not only that, she's been nominated a ton. I don't know what the mindset is going to be there. Rose Byrne, if I had legs, I'd kick you. The reason I think she doesn't get in is because I'm believing in J-Law getting in, and I've heard that these are basically the same performances, just kind of told from a different lens, kind of, and creatively it looks a little bit different. If I had legs, it's kind of a hard watch. Like it's good, and Rose Byrne is like you can't take your eyes off her, but it's just hard to get through. So how digestible is it going to be for the Academy members, like the older members, the international body? You kind of have question marks with that. Julia Roberts and Sydney Sweeney plummeted. I finally took Julia Roberts out of my 5. I had her in there really since May, but After the Hunt died a rapid death. I mean, I think it was like 48 or something on Rotten Tomatoes the other day when I looked at it, which is fucking crazy to me. Honestly, the lead actress category this year is kind of thin. Like, it's so weird that the supporting categories, in my opinion, are a lot like more competitive than lead actress this year, because that's almost never the case. I did add Kate Hudson. I already talked about Song Sung Blue, and right after I added her, they actually mentioned that they're going to be campaigning her in lead actress, which, it's focused. They have the winner. They have Jessie Buckley. So how much are they going to campaign it? I don't know, but it would be huge for them to have 2 of the 5 in a lead category. I mean, that'd be crazy. So I'm sure they would love to see it happen. And then in rounding out at 10, Sydney Sweeney is very much like Julia Roberts to me, where it's like I just don't have a better option at this current moment. Sydney Sweeney, I thought that transformative role in that Christie biopic and being a fighter and victim of domestic abuse and etc. would go a long way. And then you might even be able to put like hair and makeup in there. And whenever hair and makeup's going with an acting performance, we'll talk about The Rock in a second. A lot of times that goes a long way to the win as well, or at least getting multiple votes and being the number 2 or whatever in Demi Moore's case. And then switching over to lead actor, this one will be pretty quick because not a ton of changes. I think there might be a couple on the next slide, but in the top 5, there's no changes, except I did put Wagner Moura back in at number 5 for The Secret Agent. It's so funny, this poor guy. I know he doesn't watch his channel, but Wagner's like this. He's in 1 month, the next month he's out. Then he's in, then he's out. This month he's in for October. I've got him at number 5 for The Secret Agent. He won the Cannes Acting Prize, which doesn't always pan out. We were talking about Jesse Plemons. He won that a couple years ago for Kinds of Kindness, and the Oscars acted like that didn't even exist. So it doesn't always pan out, but it is something that he can kind of hang his hat on, like the performance is being noted and people are recognizing it, in the industry and on the awards circuit. The Brazil factor. I mean, obviously, look what they did for I'm Still Here last year. But it's going to be really strong for that factor, the country that's kind of submitting it and pushing it for international feature. In fact, it might be my front runner, even though it's not a Best Picture nominee. We'll see. Right now, I'm not doing those predictions quite yet. Those will be coming in November for international feature. But I do think it's a strong contender to win that award. Definitely a nominee. Michael B. Jordan, I don't feel as great about, but I keep telling myself, and I was talking with my members about this yesterday, that Sinners is going to get 6+ nominations probably 5, 6, 7 nominations. And I think they're going to get an acting nom. If that's true, the only one that makes sense to me is Michael B. Jordan. Now, there are some great supporting performances in that film, but you'll see in a second, and I mentioned this on the previous category for actress, supporting is so crowded those categories this year are so much more nail-biting than the lead ones, which is weird because it's usually the other way around. So because the supporting category is like literally overflowing it to the brim with possibilities, I just don't see any of those centers, actors or actresses getting in. You know, it would be like, you know, Delroy Lindo, Miles Caton, Wumi Masaka, Haley Steinfeld. I mean, they're all brilliant, and I do think that it's on the table for best casting for ensemble. I just don't see those supporting players being able to get over the hump for some of these other groups of supporting actors. You know, for films like One Battle After Another, Wicked for Good, Sentimental Value, they have really strong players in the supporting field. So we'll see. We'll get there in a second. I'll show you. I do have Timothée Chalamet at number 1. I've had him there since I woke up the morning after the Oscars this past year. I'm not going to move him. I probably will leave him in until the ceremony, which is what I did for A Complete Unknown. And then I, changed it at the last second, literally the day of the Oscars. I changed it to Adrian Brody because I was heartbroken that it probably wasn't going to happen. But I've got him at number 1 this year again for Marty Supreme. And based on the feedback out of NYFF's secret screening last night, like I said with the picture, I feel really good about just leaving him right there. If this is even better than his portrayal of Bob Dylan and what he went through to learn harmonica and guitar and the songs and the inflection, and Bob Dylan's an enigmatic character. It's not like somebody you can just watch a bunch of footage of and then replicate. And he did that flawlessly, I thought. Like I said, it was my performance of last year. If this is better than that, then yeah, okay, let's, he's got to get the win soon. Which is weird to say. The dude's in his 20s. And we're like, where's his Oscar? It's just crazy that we're thinking that. There's actors that are like 80, 90 years old that haven't even been nominated yet, and we're wondering where Timmy's Oscar is. Jeremy Allen White, I left him alone at number 2 for Deliver Me From Nowhere. I think that's basically what Timmy was last year for A Complete Unknown, is what Jeremy Allen White is this year for Deliver Me From Nowhere. He just has less prestige on his resume, at least from movies. Obviously, he's very well known for TV and The Bear, and that awards for that. But I do think his turn as Springsteen is going to be impressionable enough to where it is going to be similar to Timmy last year, and will get him a nomination. Leo, guys, I had him in my 5 since May. Everybody's like, Leo this, Leo that now, and I never took him out of my 5 for One Battle After Another. I just didn't see a world where it wasn't at least a possibility from a prediction standpoint, early prediction standpoint, when nobody knows anything, to not have Leonardo DiCaprio, possibly the greatest actor working today, nominated in a film directed by PTA. Why would we not nominate him in that scenario before we knew anything about it? And I always said that when the movie comes out and his performance is maybe, not that great, or they're like, oh, it was fine, but whatever. Or the movie is like, a 70 on Rotten Tomatoes and like, it's okay. But that's not the case. The movie did come out, and it's like the most celebrated film critically maybe ever. I mean, literally, definitely in like recent memory. So yeah, Leo's in the 5. He always has been for me. I did move him up a couple spots from 5 to 3 this month, and he could end up being the winner. Hang tight. It could, if Timmy gets upset this year, it could be Leo, because, he's only got the Revenant Oscar. Even if you're not a fan of the guy, if we're being honest with ourselves, he should be a multiple Oscar winner by now. At least 2, but probably like 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. But the Academy knows that. For whatever reason, preferential ballots, whatever it was, it could be coming. So just remember that. He's always been in my 5, and he could actually end up being the winner this year. On the next slide, Clemens and Clooney moved up a couple spots for me. I already talked about Jay Kelly and how I think the narrative and the Hollywood tie-in is going to really help that. And more so, it might help Clooney more than anything else. I've got him at 6 right now, but he could be in that 5. Clemens, I want it to happen. He's an actor that deserves so much more recognition from the Academy, and he's just hasn't gotten it. I mean, even his like little 2 or 3 minute scene in Civil War, was that last year? I think it was last year or the year before. That could have been nominated for supporting. It was literally one of the most memorable scenes in cinema for that whole year, and he was in a 3 minute scene, and he had like 5 lines, and that could have been honestly a winner for supporting actor. Like, that's how good this dude is, in my opinion. I did recently add a couple. I took out Brendan Fraser. I put in Dwayne Johnson for The Smashing Machine, The Rock, of course. I saw the movie. The movie's not a player overall. It might get, like I said earlier, screenplay or a couple random things, maybe. But the one major thing that it could get would be lead actor for Dwayne Johnson. Now, the reason I don't have him in my 5 right now, if we were basing it just on performance and what he did reenacting and relaying the Mark Kerr character to us, he would be in, because it was phenomenal. It was emotional, it was moving, it was kind of awe-inspiring and jaw-dropping to see what he did, knowing him as a WWE action character and then what he was able to do here. It's really cool. In other words, if it had been somebody who walked off the street I didn't have any knowledge of, I might not be as impressed with it. But this is all PC narrative based. I don't see the Academy nominating him because of his history in Hollywood. He's an action star, he's a wrestler. Now, when he puts in his due, according to the Academy, they might push him in there for his next role. I know he's working with Scorsese, I think, and he has a few like really prestigious directors that he's going to be working with. So he's obviously going to try to continue down this path. So I do think he could get nominated, very similar to like an Adam Sandler, which we'll get there in a second. You got to put in the work with the Academy. They're very snooty, very kind of like, show me what you got before they throw anything your way. So I don't think they're ready for The Rock Oscar nominee yet, even though he does deserve it. I also put Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon in here because he's another actor that should have a shit ton more recognition, just like Jesse Plemons on this list, and he doesn't for whatever reason. And I think I've heard in Blue Moon, which I did think was a player early on, and then I kind of lost steam. And I'm beginning to think that Ethan Hawke should be on people's mind for lead actor. It's a pretty strong category this year, especially when you look at the first like 7 or so, 8. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm seeing that one next week too. And I've just heard he just does such a phenomenal job at it. And then you got him being in the Black Phone sequel this year, which is going to be a huge success in the horror genre. It's going to make a lot of the box office for Blumhouse. So he's going to be around. He's going to be on the circuit. He's going to be on TV interviews and this and that for that movie and for Blue Moon. And he's a very well-spoken and well-respected actor that I think his moment's coming literally any day now. And then Daniel Day-Lewis for Anemone, I dropped down from 7, which was maybe a bit reactionary when I saw the goat in that trailer. But, I dropped him down based on some of the feedback out of NYFF. It's definitely mixed. It's definitely like a hard watch, much like I said with Die My Love and a couple others on this list, Begonia. But it's Daniel Day-Lewis, and the narrative is there too, where he essentially came out of retirement to act in his son's first movie. So that's a great narrative. Like, Hollywood loves family. They love connection to each other, And now we get into the categories that a lot of people raise their eyebrow at my picks or my order of picks or whatever. I'll try to be quick with this. I've talked about all these movies pretty much, except for J-Lo. Ariana Grande, just like I said with Timmy, guys, right now, in this moment, October 7th, okay, there is absolutely zero reason, based on what I know Ariana Grande did in the first movie, that I would not have her at number 1 right now for supporting actress. The movie comes out, maybe she's lead, for all we know. Maybe the performance is not as good as it was in the first one. Maybe the reviews are not as good as the first one was. Maybe, you know what I mean? Who knows? Maybe Arrivo overshadows her. I mean, all of this is hypothetical is my point. Same thing with Timmy, same thing with Ariana. Those two were the best performances last year in their categories. Now, of course, this is my opinion. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. It's subjective. But I think Ariana Grande, I think she should have swept, honestly, in supporting actress, especially when you look at Zoe Saldana in Emilia Perez. Now, I love Zoe, and I thought she did great with what she had, but that wasn't a good movie. Again, this is just my opinion. Wicked was a great movie that made a shit ton of money and was not divisive for multiple reasons when you talk about Emilia Perez. But anyway, Ariana Grande, at a minimum, should have won something for that performance of Glinda. She didn't. So if there's folks on the Academy that are like-minded, like me, or in the awards bodies in general, Globes, whoever, then she's going to get something this year. Okay, because I can only imagine her performance is going to be better, or at a minimum as good as it was in Wicked. So if that's the case, yes, she's my number 1. And just like Timmy, I'm going to ride with Ari all the way to the goddamn show. Inga Lilialas, I left at number 2 for sentimental value. I think that's the supporting play, although you'll see on the next slide. As of right now, when it comes to One Battle After Another, Marty Supreme too, to a certain extent, and sentimental value, I'm not putting 2 actresses in from any of those films yet. Could it happen? Absolutely. But right now I'm trying to be at least less risky with that in the 5. I left Gwyneth Paltrow. I moved her up 1 for Marty Supreme. Based on the feedback last night, it sounds like her and Odessa Zion are like basically both great in the movie. I just can't put Odessa in right this second because, as you see, I just added Chase Infinity not only to my 5, but I just put Chase Infinity in my 10. She wasn't in my 10 initially. There's actually been a couple other one battle after another supporting actresses in my 10 all season, but not Chase Infinity. However, after seeing the movie, I am riding with Chase Infinity. I made a joke that I was reporting for duty as her Oscar campaign manager after seeing that film. I'm not on the SAG, I'm not in the Academy, so I don't know what their mindset is, but I think to myself, if somebody on the Academy, who obviously loves film, sees a young actress, in this case 25 years old, and they're acting against performers like Regina Hall and Leo and Sean Penn, and they are like stealing the scenes that they're in with those people, and they're like, to a certain extent, carrying the narrative in the last like half of the movie, which I think she does. They must be impressed. That's what I think. So I try to like just stay with my thought process when I do these predictions, at least early on. You know, when the precursors come into play, that's a whole different story, because then you're just kind of doing math, really. You know, she won this, she didn't win that, she wasn't in this, you know, then you kind of do that. But right now, my thought process is, how impressed must they be that this girl, Chase Infinity, has literally never acted in anything aside from a couple TV shows. She was on Presumed Innocent with Gyllenhaal in a small role. I think she plays his daughter on that show. I never saw it. And I think she was in a couple music videos. That's it. She's in one battle after another with PTA directing and killed it. So you could argue actually that she's lead in this movie. They won't do it, but you could. But from a supporting standpoint, especially like in the last half of that movie, she is on fire. I mean, she absolutely is. You can't take your eyes off her. You root for her. You wonder where she is when she's not on camera. Is she okay? You really invest in what Chase Infinity does in this film. And the other actors support her so well that it makes sense. You don't see Leo and Sean Penn with her. You see the characters, Willa and Lockjaw and Bob. You know, you see them together as this collective kind of like group of characters in one battle. And PTA obviously deserves a lot of credit for that also. And then the other 5, I am leaving alone. I really don't know what to do with Jennifer Lopez. In my mind, again, I try to stick with my thought process until I really can't anymore. I just see J-Lo getting a nomination, and she is getting older. She is getting to a point where she's doing these projects like Hustlers, like Kiss of the Spider Woman, that are like almost catered to her talents, where if you can't get nominated for films like that, when is it going to happen, you know? So I think that what I've heard of her in Kiss of the Spider Woman, it could happen. And I think that I'm hopeful that it will, not only because I love J-Lo, but because think of this lineup for supporting actress. Holy shit. Gwyneth Paltrow basically making a comeback. She's been in nothing, unless you count the Marvel stuff, which, sorry, I didn't mean to talk down about Marvel stuff, but you know, like an independent or like a juicy role. But you have her doing a comeback, and then you would have like essentially a brand new actress in Chase Infinity. Same thing with Inga, that, you know, at least stateside, a lot of people don't know. And then you got these two like just giant megastars of music and screen, Ariana Grande and J-Lo. Holy shit, what a lineup, you know, for supporting actress. I wish I could say the same for lead this year, but it just seems a lot weaker to me. Going on to the next slide, and here's where some of those near misses come into play. So Elle Fanning and Teyana Taylor from Sentimental Value on One Battle After Another, those two could very easily be in the 5. Really, both of them could. Again, it makes more sense to me right now at this juncture to have the love spread out a little bit, to where there's a different movie represented in that 5. So if that ends up not being the case and the other ones aren't strong enough, like J-Lo, for example, then yeah, you know, these could creep in. The thing with Teyana Taylor, and I had her in my 5 a few months ago, but after seeing the movie, I just don't know if she's in it enough. I really don't. I know that sounds silly because this is a supporting role, and you look at like Isabella Rossellini for Conclave last year. She was in it for like 7 minutes. You know, I mean, I get it. I get the argument. And Teyana's in the first like 25 to 30 minutes of the film. And not only that, her character of Perfidia kind of sets up the rest of the movie. The whole structure of the film is kind of around what her character does in that first half hour. Kinda. So I get it, you know, and her relationship to the other characters, without giving anything away, kind of drive the movie forward also. So even though she's not in it, we don't see her face physically after that first half hour, her presence is kind of felt throughout the movie. In other words, the movie would not be the same movie without what we do see of her. So that's a case that can be made for her in supporting. And then Elle Fanning, I haven't seen the film yet, but I do think, as she's staying at number 6 for me, I do think she's right on the fence. Emily Blunt and Glenn Close are additions for me in supporting actress. And then Amy Madigan stayed at number 9 for Weapons. I love Amy Madigan, and I love whenever horror gets a mention at the Oscars. The only thing is, I do not think this is going to happen. In fact, after Tiana Taylor, I don't think any of those stand a chance. Emily Blunt's character in The Smashing Me, she's really good in it. She's really good in it. But it is a very unlikable character that doesn't have a clear motivation as to why she's unlikable. It's just presented, and that's obviously not her fault. That's the screenplay or the editing or whatever. But it's just like, here's Dawn. She's a POS. She's not a great person. She's toxic. Have fun. You know, we don't know why. We don't see any of the motivation or the backstory or really even anything that happens between the couple, which is kind of weird. So that would lead up to that kind of arc for her. And then Glenn Close, I haven't seen Wake Up Dead Man yet, but this is a performer. I was joking about Meryl Streep earlier, but this is an actress that you just have to pay attention. You know, when there's a movie of hers in the mix and she's in it, she could get nominated. I mean, what is it, 8 or 9 nominations she has at this point. So it's a possibility. If it's a standout performance in an ensemble group, then it could get enough like goodwill to be like, this is Glenn Close is the reason I love this. And then it gets enough. You know, right now I've got it right outside, really at the bottom, but I did just add it to my predictions after hearing some of the feedback, because I think Rian Johnson's probably got another screenplay nomination, which is crazy. All 3 will get nominated for that, which is awesome. All right, we're getting there, guys. So for supporting actor, this one should actually go really quickly because there's very, very few changes, just kind of the order a little bit. So I left Stellan Skarsgård at 1. I think his lineage and kind of seniority with the Academy and with Hollywood, and I've heard that he could be a sweeper this season if it catches on, his performance. So that could be like the one major takeaway from sentimental value, where it's like, okay, this is what this movie's getting. So I do think that could happen. I'm going to leave him at 1. There's nothing to really make me change my mind too much quite yet. Paul Mescal and Sean Penn, I moved up. They were both in the 5. They just moved up a couple spots. You could switch them tomorrow, and I wouldn't be upset. I mean, it's 2A and 2B. I think those guys are both right there, and it's just going to matter, you know, what the response is from the Academy, what they connect to the most. I do think outside of Skarsgård, like I've already said, that I think Hamnet is probably Oscar bait, the movie. So I think that if that movie does succeed on a large scale across multiple categories, that performers like Mescal could come along with that. And of course, the precursors are going to tell us a lot also. You know, this sounds like a big BAFTA movie to me too. So, you know, we'll see. Sean Penn, a legend, 2-time Oscar winner. You know, the thing is, he's got some things in the public eye that are not, you know, super favorable to him if you're looking at it from a PC perspective. And then he's kind of known for not really liking the Oscars. It kind of says they're pointless and he doesn't really care about them. And you got to think maybe he wouldn't even come to the ceremony. I know those are older comments that he said, but I don't know if he still holds that point of view. But believe me, they probably know that or remember if they were around back then. So that could hurt him, but the performance is just so good as Colonel Lockjaw in this movie. So, you know, and the Academy loves their villains in the supporting roles, and we don't really have any. In fact, on my 5 here, none of these are villains. And then Adam Sandler and Jeremy Strong stayed in the 5, but they just dropped down a few spots. Sandler, I honestly, of everything that I've talked about today, I don't know that I want anything to happen more than Sandler to get nominated for an Oscar. I mean, we have got to do that, and I hope that he's good enough in Jay Kelly and that the film gets enough love to make it happen. Because even with the film like Uncut Gems, he was great in that, but the movie got nothing from the Academy. Very, very little at all, actually, on the award circuit. So he didn't get it, you know, because the movie wasn't getting the attention. So if Jay Kelly does end up, like I think I had it at my 9, right, in Best Picture, if it does end up there, then you could very easily go, okay, Adam Sandler, you're finally getting your nomination. And then Jeremy Strong, you know, he's been coming on as of late with, of course, Succession, but you know, last year getting nominated for The Apprentice, which was a pretty unsavory role. That was a villain role. So that made sense. And they gave it to him. You know, in Deliver Me From Nowhere, he sounds very like, his voice is a little bit different. He's got the kind of like balding head and the giant glasses, period setting. Sounds like he's going to be a very like, almost like a rah-rah cheerleader, best friend for Springsteen, and is going to be kind of a secondary hero in the movie. Almost like Edward Norton's character from A Complete Unknown, who did get nominated. But that was a very quiet performance. I don't expect that from Jeremy Strong. I expect it to be a little more Oscar-y. And then literally nothing changed on the second slide here for my near misses, so I'll just run down them real quick. I've got Jonathan Bailey, Wicked for Good, right there at number 6. I've already kind of explained why with the success of that film, kind of depending on what happens. Delroy Lindo, Miles Caton, I kept in for Sinners in the supporting actor field, but I don't think it's going to happen. It could for one of them. It's definitely not going to happen for both of them. But right now, I've just got it as a near miss. Jacob Elordi I put in last month for Frankenstein after hearing that he was a standout performance as Frankenstein's monster, which I did not expect. I thought maybe Oscar Isaac or even Christoph Waltz I had in there for a couple seconds as a supporting role, but I guess Elordi is the standout, which you've got that hair and makeup, which you got to imagine this is definitely a nominee for hair and makeup, I would think. So you have that actor tied to the hair and makeup. You know, what it's getting nominated for is really the prosthetics and the makeup on that person, and that person could come with that nomination. They tie in together a lot of times. And then Robert Pattinson's rounding out my 10 for Die My Love. You know, he's not going to be there much longer probably, unless the movie comes out to different reception of his performance, because it's all about J-Law so far. But kind of like I said earlier, I think Pattinson's like right there. Like, you know, I mean, he could come out with a movie tomorrow and you could be like, he's winning the Oscar finally. And then I'm getting hoarse, so I'll just go through the last category here, which is Best Director on today's video. I did shoot up my boy PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, for One Battle After Another. Even though he's not at number one for Best Picture for the film, like I said earlier when I went over that, I think it's a split this year. And I had already thought that, you know, either Hamnet or One Battle was going to win Picture early on, and I had Coogler winning Director, even though I didn't think Sinners was going to pull out Picture. So I thought it was a split anyway. Coogler, man, what a bummer. Until I saw One Battle, I had Coogler my number one. I thought he's going to win. I mean, they love him. He's an auteur. He box office is huge with Black Panther. He's made important, like, racially important, societally important films. And, you know, this movie, he does that and mixes it with genre and makes a shit ton of money at the box office, which he did with Black Panther. So he's doing all of it on this film. And then he's doing the IMAX ratios and it's, you know, going over all the different, like, filmed in 70 millimeter and all this shit. And it's like, he just loves movies, man, you know, and they're going to really respond to his campaigning and his like presence on the circuit. But then I saw One Battle, and I do think that this is PTA's year. I don't see how you can't give PTA the directing Oscar for that movie based on the feedback and the reception. I mean, it's the best film, at least that he's ever directed, even if it's not your favorite. It's the best directed film that PTA's ever done. And he's doing different things too. Like, he's going in different avenues, showing different sides of his direction. So it's a very layered directing effort in that regard too. So I think he's the winner this year. But I don't necessarily think it's going to win Best Picture, although it could. It's my number two. I left Jafar Panahi alone for It Was Just an Accident. I talked about that earlier. The narrative's going to help that as well. He's going to get nominated because of the narrative surrounding the Iranian government storyline and his kind of dissension from that government and country. And they don't want him to make the movies, but he's still making them. It means so much to him to get the word out and this, that. And for him to be there and to be able to hopefully, you know, accept or present or do something like that would be phenomenal based on the situation that he's going through. So it's going to be a very important narrative, along with being a very well-received film. And as you can see, or as you saw, I think a Best Picture nominee also. Chloe Zhao for Hamnet. She's the director of, in my opinion, the front runner for the most wins at next year's Oscars, and that's Hamnet. So whether that's 4 or 5, whatever it ends up being, she's the director and it wins, let's just say 5 Oscars. Then she has a very good shot at winning director also, but she definitely has a shot at being nominated for it. That's why I have her in the 5. Also, if you can see here, she would be the only female representation this year if it stays as is. There could be another, and I'll talk about it here in a second, but I think Chloe Zhao for Hamnet being that Oscar baity film this year is definitely the most likely female to get nominated. And then Joaquin Trier for Sentimental Value would round out my 5. He's dropped down, but I think Sentimental Value is right there in the top 5 in almost every category. So I don't see why director would be any different. And he did get snubbed for Worst Person in the World, just like Renate Ransva. So, you know, he's got notoriety for his screenplays and that kind of stuff, which will probably be in the mix this year also. And you've seen it show up on a lot of my different slides. So I think it's definitely a possibility for him. And then in looking at the final slide here, John M. Chu, Park Chan-wook, and Guillermo del Toro, I didn't move. I left them all in the bottom 5, but near misses on the bench. I've already kind of talked about it. If Park Chan-wook's going to have his moment, is it going to be for Best Picture nomination or possibly both? It could be both. It could be 0. It could be none. It's most likely going to be an international, and he'll be stout competition in that category. John M. Chu, Wicked for Good could be one of those nominations for Wicked that didn't happen last season that happens this year, even though it might get less overall. So if it gets like 7 or 8 nominations, could Bailey get in there? Could Chu get in there? I think so. And then Del Toro's Del Toro. You know, I'm not going to give you a ton of commentary on that one. He's remaking a classic story that's right in his wheelhouse. and I've already told you how much the Academy loves him. So yeah, of course he's on the board. He could easily sneak into the 5, and I wouldn't even remotely be upset or shocked. I see it next week, like I said, so I can't wait to kind of give you a little more feedback on that at that time. And then the 2 that I added in recently are Catherine Bigelow for House of Dynamite and Josh Safdie. I literally just added before I press record for Marty Supreme. You know, Catherine Bigelow is kind of a no-brainer, but I did add her because I now have House of Dynamite in Best Picture, if you recall. And I don't think it's going to get any acting prizes or nominations. So because the acting's not in play, maybe a couple of the text. Noah Oppenheim screenplay is definitely in play. But director could go along with that Best Picture nomination because of her name and that credibility among the Academy and the historical just reference of her name. Josh Safdie I put in kind of reluctantly, but also because if he's directing something his first time out that's getting the kind of praise that I heard from it last night, it could happen. Now, he could not be in my 10 next month, or he could be my number 1. I mean, you know, he's one of those names that I'm like, I don't really know what to do with until the more I kind of let it kind of seep into my head here. But right now, I think it's pretty smart to have him in that 6 to 10 range. All right, guys, I'm going to edit this down for you before I put it out in a day or two. And you might not believe this, but I just spoke for an hour and 40 minutes on this video. I love talking about the Oscars, but I am hoarse. My throat hurts a little. Don't forget, if you're into it, help me out. Click join down below. You can read all about channel memberships. You can win a free Blu-ray. You can get all other kind of perks if you're into it. I would really appreciate your consideration. At the very least, I hope you subscribe. I will be back in November, the first week of November, with my updated power rankings. And I will also be introducing, probably on a separate video, my first like 4 or 5 categories below the line. Well, kind of below the line. I'm going to start with the 2 screenplay categories. I'm also going to be doing my first power rankings for animated feature nominees. And I'm also thinking about throwing in best casting on the next video as well. So look forward to all that stuff in the coming month or so. And I'm always out here talking about movies and awards season. So I hope to see you again soon. I'll be out here in the garage.